Hello again, my subscribers. Today we are doing a Let's Read. This time we're going into the trio of Impractically Perfect Characters, Chapter 3. So, let's dive in. Set a course for Hogwarts with great urgency and of running chickens, said Garfield to John Freeman, who sat in the pilot's seat and set the course. Ebony sat next to him, smiling. Garfield entered his cabin and sat down in the lotus position, his eyebrows furrowed. Never before had a woman stood up to him more than once. This wasn't like him to let it happen. Maybe he was losing his edge. Traveling the world and the galaxy introduced him to many different cultures and views. Was this why he let Ebony get the upper hand? He didn't know. But he knew that his reputation was under attack by a sexy witch. He needed a plan, and fast. But before he could formulate any thought, the klaxon alarm sounded throughout the vessel. Garfield shot up to his feet. That alarm could mean only one thing. That one thing caused Garfield to smile excitedly. "What the fuck is going on?" screamed Ebony, covering her ears. "That is the time travel alarm," explained to John Freeman. "You guys Tim travel?" asked Ebony. "Yes," said John Freeman. "Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way doesn't look incredulous." "We had Tim Turners at Hogwarts. My friend Bloody Mary Smith had one. She used it to get to all of her classes on Tim." Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway will have to tell John Freeman more about Hogwarts after the mission is complete. "What mission?" asked Ebony. "Aren't we going to Hogwarts right now?" "No, there is trouble, and it requires the attention of Garfield and John Freeman. We have to live up to family name and face full-life consequences." "But can it wait till later?" "No," said Garfield. "It cannot." He entered the cockpit, loaded with a belt full of guns and ammunition. The buckle had a drawing of lasagna on it. "What's our mission?" asked Garfield. "A place called..." John Freeman looked closer to read the word correctly. "Minas Tirith." "What's Minas Tirith?" asked Ebony. "Shoot first, ask questions later," said Garfield. "All systems be going with maximum effort." "It's time," said John Freeman. "To live up to family name and face full-life consequences." John Freeman pressed a button, and a psychedelic tunnel surrounded the ship. Their speed increased. Everything around them turned white. The three inhabitants gained sight once again. Ebony's hand instantly went to her head, which felt like a mandrake was screaming directly at her brain. John Freeman, whose headache was similarly painful, pulled out a small tin cartridge the size of a cigarette case. He opened it and pulled out 3 small tablets. He handed one to Ebony and one to Garfield. "Take this," said John Freeman, gulping his tablet. "It'll cure the headache." Ebony gulped her tablet down. Garfield stared at his tablet, scoffing. "These are ladies' pills. Only the thrill of adventure can cure a headache with remedies." He stormed out of the cockpit, quickly gulping down the tablet when they weren't looking. "How can you stand that moron?" asked Ebony. "Garfield's manhood obsession may be overwhelming," said John Freeman, "but Garfield is good in battle. Come, let Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway and John Freeman join Garfield before Garfield causes too much trouble." "What kind of trouble?" asked Ebony. "That kind of trouble," said John Freeman. Ebony followed him out of the ship and onto the courtyard of an enormous ivory castle. A big leafless tree stood proud in the center of it all. People around them stared at the docked spaceship in amazement, but others sparred words with Garfield, who confronted the guard. "You cannot see the king until you state your business," said the guard. Here is my business, said Garfield. He grabbed the guard and headbutted him, sending him into the stone ground. Only his unmoving head was visible. Another guard checked him and drew back. He's dead, said the second guard to Garfield. You will escort yourself out of the kingdom of Gondor this instant. Escort this, said Garfield as he backhanded the second guard onto his back, unconsciousness. What is Garfield thinking just barging in here, asked John Freeman. He will live, said Garfield. He is only unconscious with sleepings. Garfield and John Freeman talked about this many times, said John Freeman. I can't wait, said Garfield. You know this with awareness. Well, sometimes Garfield has to wait. Garfield, John Freeman, and Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway are in a strange land where many strange things might occur. And Garfield has already scared the citizens around here. They do not need to be fearing me with tremblings, said Garfield, turning to everyone. You do not need to be fearing me. I don't wish to harm you, only to save you from the threat which threatens your city with menacings. Follow me, said an old man. He led them to the doorway of the throne room. Ebony looked around. It was too bright for her. It could have used a slight darkening up. The old man opened the doors and they entered. Ahead of them was the throne, where a figure sat. Another was on his right side. The old man ushered Ebony, Garfield, and John Freeman closer to the mysterious figure. Your Majesty, said the old man, 3 strange travelers have come to see you. The figure sitting on the throne looked at them. He was a strong-looking man with a full beard, long hair, and light eyes. He looked as if this was a position long reserved for him, but only achieved when he was forced to rise to the occasion. Quite an occasion it was, if only the trio knew. Your kingness, began Garfield, it has come to our attention that a threat has entered your kingdom. We are here to destroy it with bullets and brawn. The person at his right, a woman with blonde hair and dead blue eyes, grabbed the king's shoulder tightly. No, the king said monotonously. There is no threat. But the monitor on the ship said otherwise, said John Freeman. Excuse John Freeman, but what is the king's name? I am King Aragorn, said the king, son of Arathorn. This is my advisor, Svetlana. Welcome to our kingdom, said the woman named Svetlana. Are you a prep? Asked Ebony. Because you look like one. I don't understand what you mean, said Svetlana. Yeah, you're a prep, said Ebony, pulling out her wand. Wait, yelled John Freeman. Knockius outus, said Ebony, waving her wand. A black orb shot out and hit the crystal Svetlana wore around her neck. It shattered, and a light shone through the throne room. It dimmed, and a naked woman with long hair was on the floor. She stood up and looked around. The first odd thing about her was that her ears were pointed. Ebony recognized this instantly. Oh, my fucking Satan, she screamed. Get it? 'Cause I'm Gothic. You're a magical fairy. Not quite, said the naked woman, covering herself. I'm an elf. My name is Queen Arwen, and I am in dire need of clothing. Look what you've done, yelled Svetlana. Aragorn rubbed his eyes, looking up at Svetlana. You, he realized angrily. You tricked me. All I thought about was us, said Svetlana, her eyes watering. Aragorn looked at Arwen lying on the ground and immediately ran to her side. He detached his cloak from his shoulders and wrapped it around his queen. But he wasn't finished with Svetlana. He turned back to her. You told me you were a princess. I was. I told you that the Dark Lord was after me when he took the hobbits to Isengard. Aragorn looked at Svetlana confused. What? The hobbits are safely back in the Shire, said Arwen to Aragorn. Isengard is abundant with trees. There is no evil there. Not anymore. The Watchwood is still there. Enough soft stuff, said Garfield. Let's get to fighting and loving with bullets blazing. Very well, said Svetlana sadly. She lowered her hands and out came a dozen spiders. They scurried about the place. We must stop them before they reach the citizens, Aragorn said urgently. He unsheathed his sword, the Flame of the West, and shielded Arwen. The old man ran for the door, but a spider pounced on him and ate his head. Garfield blew it away with his Desert Eagle. He shot at 2 more. This was something of a game to him, and he was beating everyone at it in his mind. John Freeman retrieved the semi-automatic weapon from the holder on his back and fired away at a few other spiders. He didn't like resorting to this type of violence, but this called for it. It was spiders after all. The hall was painted with spider guts when John Freeman was finished. Ebony shot black orbs from her wand, but the spiders would not stop multiplying. She looked up and caught Svetlana using her hands to open her robes. She looked closer. The spiders were escaping from her womb. Ew, she thought. Just then she saw a spider coming her way. She jumped and landed on the spider, crushing it. Her eyes turned back to Svetlana. The spiders exited single file out of her womb. An idea popped into her head. It would be tricky, but it just had to work. She ran into the line, using the spiders as stepping stones towards Svetlana. She performed the killing curse with a wave of her wand, and Svetlana went down like a broken pillar of salt. All of the spiders died as a result. Garfield and John Freeman turned to Ebony. "What?" asked Ebony. Garfield smiled and gave her a thumbs up. "Thank you so much," said Aragorn, who stood next to Arwen. "How can we repay the kindness?" "I will be needing payment of lasagna," said Garfield, "and maybe a night with much lovings." He looked at Arwen, who backed away in horror. "Garfield, John Freeman, and Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way," John Freeman began quickly, "will just take lasagna. John Freeman will teach King Aragorn how it is made." "Done," said King Aragorn. While John Freeman taught Aragorn how to make lasagna, Garfield approached Ebony. "That was good fighting," said Garfield. "How did you know how to defeat her?" "I don't know," said Ebony. "I just guessed." "It was a good guess with knowledge," said Garfield. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some lovings to make with this sexy elf lady." Garfield walked away from Ebony and headed in the same direction as John Freeman and the king and queen. "How many times does John Freeman have to tell Garfield," began John Freeman, "just because there's a beautiful woman doesn't mean Garfield can immediately do whatever Garfield wants." "I take all sexy ladies," said Garfield. He dropped a bag of ice and posed in a manly stance. It didn't help his point much that a big goose egg formed on his head. "Queen Arwen was married to King Aragorn," said John Freeman. "That means Queen Arwen was off limits. My friend, take a chance and test the limits of your boundaries with bravery adventures. You never know what you'll find. John Freeman knows that Garfield, John Freeman, and Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway are not welcome back to Gondor. Now excuse John Freeman. John Freeman must attend to next destination." John Freeman left Garfield in his cabin to nurse his injury. It constantly amazed the two for different reasons. Garfield, because why ladies had to put up a fight against his manly charms. John Freeman, because why they haven't been blocked from every corner of time and space by now due to Garfield's chauvinistic behavior. John Freeman entered the cockpit and saw Ebony looking at Draco's picture. He sat down next to her. "How is Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway?" asked John Freeman. "Depersed," said Ebony. "Would Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway wish to talk about it?" asked John Freeman. "No, I just want to see Draco again." "Very well." John Freeman set the course for Hogwarts. The ship landed on the grounds of a massive castle near a lake. It could bypass all of the magical barriers due to some computer hacks, all of John Freeman's design. The ship's walkway lowered. Ebony ran toward the doors of the castle's entrance. It was a pretty big castle and looked like it had been there since the 9th or 10th century. Huge, rambling, scary-looking, with a jumble of towers and battlements, it had been headed by only 4 people in its entire existence. Professor Albus Dumbledore, Dolores Umbridge, Severus Snape, and currently Minerva McGonagall, who succeeded Snape after his death. Snape, like McGonagall, succeeded Dumbledore after his death. Umbridge briefly took over when she was a Defense Against the Dark Arts professor. Hers was a story never forgotten, especially by Ebony, who had several run-ins with her. Umbridge had a sizable amount of power in the wizarding world, but her reign ended thanks to some students, one of them being the famous Harry Potter. The school had gone through a lot outside of that, but somehow survived through the courage and persistence of its students and teachers. Ebony stood before the great doors. 25 years. Would it be the same as it was before? Of course it would. It just had to be the same. Why would they still have the sign warning about a giant squid outside the lake? True, stories about a giant squid in the lake ran rampant through the wizarding world, but if it was the same giant squid that fell in love and lust with the castle in her 5th year, then that meant the school would be the same back in 1997. She remembered hearing stories about Filch, a squib, a non-magical child with magical parents, who worked for the castle, having to clean the walls and floors of the castles due to a load of ink. It wasn't the ink from a quill bottle. No, this was different. It was full of mucus. They all knew it, but none wanted to say a word. For Ebony, it was weird that a cephalopod would fall in love with a school. But on the other hand, there was an oddly romantic nature to it. Society didn't stop this animal from making love to the school. Therefore, society wouldn't separate her from Draco. She drew her wand out, and she heard a roar from behind before she could cast any spell. She saw Garfield and John Freeman popping wheelies on their motorcycles and speeding toward her. She jumped out of the way. Garfield ran through the doors. John Freeman came in close behind him. Both riders turned off their engines. Garfield beat John Freeman once again, said John Freeman. It was common for Garfield to beat him during these races. Don't be getting discouraged, my friend, said Garfield. Someday you may win. Garfield started before the countdown and finished back on the ship. But John Freeman didn't bother to tell him anymore. The truth didn't get to his giant orange friend. What are you simpletons doing? Yelled Ebony. We were having a manly race with great cycling, Garfield explained, to see who would get there first. And you came in last, sweet cheeks. You broke the door down, said Ebony. I was going to use magic to get in. And if that didn't work... Magic not working? Well, in that case, we'll just knock. What are you, high? Of course magic works. Magic didn't keep John Freeman, Garfield, and Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway from landing here, said John Freeman. Uno, nobody licks you, said Ebony. That is being enough, roared Garfield. I will not be having cruelty toward my friends with bullyings. Oh, fuck off, said Ebony. They moved further into the castle, with Ebony leading the way. Garfield manly strutted behind her. John Freeman caught up, but as soon as they ventured toward the doors of the great hall, they heard footsteps behind them. They saw a big man with a huge beard and lantern in his hand. He looked cross. Who are you? He demanded. How did you get in here? Hairgrid? Said Ebony. It's me, don't you remember? It's pronounced Hagrid, said the giant. Whatever, Hagrid. Don't you remember we were in a band together? I've never been in a band at all. But I do remember a girl who wanted me to be in a band and was bothering everyone about it. When they turned her down, she... Oh, no. Oh, no. Ebony? That's right. You're supposed to be dead. Surprise, poser. And who are these? Asked Hagrid, pointing to Garfield and John Freeman. Yes, he finally remembered Ebony, and it was a memory he didn't want to keep. While he was known to mingle with students, he never made any advances toward them. It was this that created the unwanted memory of her. I am Garfield, Garfield introduced himself, and this is my friend John Freeman. Footsteps bounded in the foyer. Leading the procession was an older woman wearing a pointy hat. At her tail were a few other teachers, one of them a dwarf. What is the meaning of this intrusion? Demanded the woman. Headmistress McGonagall, ma'am, said Hagrid to the woman. This young woman says she's a former student here. Miss McGoogle, said Ebony. It's me, Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway. McGonagall approached Ebony. She dealt with all sorts of students. Each one was a different case. But there was one she would instead not remember, if only for all the trouble she caused them. Yet here she was, still looking as ridiculous as ever. Ebony? Said McGonagall. How did you... Where is Draco? Demanded Ebony. Draco? Draco Malfoy, you srupid bick. Don't speak to her like that, yelled Hagrid. He didn't exactly understand the meaning behind what Ebony called McGonagall, but he gathered that it was intended as a slight against the headmistress. Shut the fuck up, poser. Draco Malfoy, McGonagall began, is not here. He hasn't been a Hogwarts student for over 20 years. Lie! Screamed Ebony. That's what John Freeman tried to tell Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway, said John Freeman. But Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway wouldn't listen. I grow bored, screamed Garfield. Let's blow this popsicle stand and grab lasagna with ladies. McGonagall and the other teachers stared at Garfield. I think, she started, you need to leave. All of you. But, began Ebony. Now, boomed McGonagall. Ebony wanted to use her magic against McGonagall. She always hated it when teachers tried to keep her and Draco apart. But she knew full well that the teachers were more potent than she and the other students combined. Resigned, she and Garfield and John Freeman left Hogwarts. Back on the ship, Garfield lifted a 2,000-pound hand weight in each hand. More than one would like to raise, but he was known to overdo strength training. Ebony sat in the cockpit, listening to My Chemical Romance, a band from her youth. John Freeman sat in the driver's seat. The ship flew due to an autopilot. Ebony was deep in thought. What is Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway thinking about? Asked John Freeman. These thoughts were far too private to share publicly. Still, they included a night in Hogsmeade attending a Good Charlotte concert before they became a sensation, almost losing her virginity to Draco in the Forbidden Forest, and the instant shyness he felt around her. These were the moments that belonged to them, and she wanted him back. How I'm gonna get Draco back, said Ebony. Where did you say he was? At Draco Malfoy's mansion, said John Freeman. Den dat is where I'll go, said Ebony. Get us there. John Freeman set a course for London. The ship is low on fuel, said John Freeman. It had been smooth sailing to London for the three. The destination was clear, and Ebony was soon to be with Draco. She even dressed for such an occasion. Black lace-top boots with high heels. On her legs were ripped red fishnets. A black leather mini-dress was wrapped around her body, designed to look like a corset. Red ripped fishnets covered her arms. Her hair was straightened into spikes. Her nails were painted black. A liberal appliance of black eyeliner was used. Her lips were painted black. An additional caking of white foundation rested on her already pale face. Appearance mattered greatly to Ebony, especially since she spent 1,000 years in hell trying to escape from prep clothing. When John Freeman first set the course for London, she told him to make a stop at Hot Topic so she could get herself some clothes. Everything in there was just as different, and shopping proved difficult due to the specificity of her list. What the hell is this? Asked Ebony. She saw nothing but clothing with cartoons from Disney characters, superheroes, strange-looking thin boys and girls in school uniforms, and names of TV shows she missed out on for obvious reasons. The Hot Topic store, said John Freeman. No, it's not, said Ebony. Look around you. I am, said Garfield, and all I see is sexy ladies with boys and other sexy ladies. What they be needing is man like me. I can give them lovings like they never knew with my Orge Love Comet. Can you for once stop thinking about sex? Asked Ebony, disgusted. Besides, these girls are too young for you. Sexy ladies have an age limit? Asked Garfield. He never thought about the statute of limitations for age. However, he wondered more than once why some ladies were tighter in the vagina than others. At first, he attributed it to penis size, but he wasn't so sure it was just that anymore. Yes, said Ebony, You telling me that you had sex with underage girls? And what if I did? Asked Garfield defensively. Besides, no sexy ladies have an age limit. Ew, you fucking perv! Ebony screamed. You telling me you're a pedo? All eyes in the store turned to Ebony. She hated it when people stared at her, especially if they were posers, and these people were posers in her mind. She flipped her middle finger at them. A young man dressed in the same clothing as the rest of the customers, but wearing a name tag on his chest, approached Ebony. Ma'am, said the employee, we'd appreciate it if you used family-friendly gestures in this environment. And I'd appreciate it if you had gothic clothes rather than preppy clothes, said Ebony. We have plenty of gothic clothing, said the employee. Here, I'll show you. He led Ebony to an area, and she swooned. The only downside was there weren't any shirts for gothic bands like My Chemical Romance and Good Charlotte. How she learned about My Chemical Romance was still a mystery to all except those either fortunate or unfortunate enough to become close to Ebony, like her best friend, Raven. It was unknown what became of her after she graduated from Hogwarts. Some think she may have committed suicide, like she and Ebony often mused over, but others say she lived among muggles and was a woman of the Catholic faith. They all agreed that she and Ebony shared almost everything, discounting bodily fluids. What Raven knew, and never told anyone, except her husband, a pro-life anti-LGBTQ+, Trump Republican senator from Greenbow, Alabama, was Ebony had a secret. There was a period in Ebony's life when she hated present-day Hogwarts. After she saw the movie Back to the Future, she became obsessed with the idea of knowing what the future holds. She knew that Bloody Mary had a time turner, which she used to attend all her classes. It was a tiny time machine she wore around her neck. One day, when Bloody Mary wasn't looking, Ebony took her time turner and set it a little further into the future than she intended. She therefore did not know her fate. Perhaps this was for the best. She roamed the future world, seeing all sorts of things for which she has no memory, except for a band of young men. Their name was My Chemical Romance. The lead singer was Gerard Way. She fell in love. The first song she heard was Welcome to the Black Parade. She knew instantly she had found that band for her. So she paid whatever money she had and bought a CD. She returned to her time and shared the music with Raven. They listened to it multiple times, and Ebony decided to adopt the last name Way as her own. Of course, when she returned to the land of the living, it was a devastating blow to learn that My Chemical Romance broke up in 2013. That must be why hell was dispersed, said Ebony when she read the news on the computer in the ship. But she couldn't stay stuck on that. She had a mission, and with the items bought, she and her odd comrades set out for Malfoy Mansion. The klaxon alarms sounded throughout the ship. While Garfield exuded enthusiasm over the next mission, Ebony was less enthused. You got to be kidding, exclaimed Ebony. Where to? Said Garfield. Seattle, Washington, said John Freeman. Why the fuck are we going to Seattle? Asked Ebony. We'll see with revelations, said Garfield. The ship landed in the courtyard of a dilapidated high school, and while the children saw the vehicle, they didn't respond in a way considered appropriate for an event like this. Instead, they gave a long, resounding ooh in perfect unison. They didn't jump either when the walkway lowered. Ebony, Garfield, and John Freeman exited the ship. They looked around, seeing no immediate threat in sight. Ebony stared at the expressionless teenagers. Discomfort rose within her. What the fuck are you looking at, Preps? She yelled. That is not the way to talk to the people Garfield, John Freeman, and Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway will be saving, said John Freeman. Let John Freeman show Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway how to talk to teenagers. He looked at the kids. Citizens of the high school, he began. John Freeman, Garfield, and Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway do not wish harm. John Freeman, Garfield, and Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway only wish to save the people of this high school. Who is this principal? A man stepped forward. Balding and nervous, he looked at them. Hello, strangers, he said. I'm Principal Lehman. John Freeman pointed to himself. Then to the respective others, Garfield and Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way. "We are here to do manly things," said Garfield. "Tell us, who threatens your elementary's playground field with bullyings?" "It's not an elementary school, you dunce," said Ebony. "It's a high school." "Is there a person that has become a problem?" asked John Freeman. "Or persons?" "There are 2 boys," said Lehman, "but they're not here." "Where are they?" asked John Freeman. "I'll show you the way," said Lehman. His nervousness came through even more prominently than before. Something about the 2 boys responsible for the trio's call to action spooked the principal. Both John Freeman and Garfield saw it, but they let the man take all 3 of them into the building. Anyone unfortunate enough to catch a glimpse of the exterior of this school would be wise to consider themselves fortunate never to see the interior, because it was potentially worse. Lehman led the trio down the hall. The floor tiles were so filthy and molded that the mold pushed the tiles out of the grouting. The wall's paint came off in chips and scattered onto the floor. The ceiling was stained with what looked like brown paint. "Why are the ceiling tiles brown?" asked John Freeman. "Was paint splashed upon them?" "Dat's not paint," said Ebony. "It is." The pause made Lehman, John Freeman, and Garfield uncomfortable. Ebony didn't usually use dramatic pauses long enough to drive a freight train through them. Yet here she was, silent as the blood splatter. Ebony answered jarringly. Her cohorts and Lehman jumped. "Yes," said Lehman, then leaned forward to John Freeman. "Did she just have a stroke?" "John Freeman doesn't know," said John Freeman. "John Freeman doesn't know," said John Freeman. John Freeman hasn't known Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way long enough to know of any ailments physically or mentally, or any current medications currently prescribed. But it was now added to his schedule once the mission was completed. Lehman continued to a door leading to a classroom. This number was 217. "They're in here," said Lehman, trying to control his wavering voice. Garfield, John Freeman, and Ebony readied their weapons. Lehman grabbed the doorknob and turned it slowly. He swung the door open, and John Freeman, Garfield, and Ebony bolted inside, pointing their Desert Eagles and wand ahead, but they stopped before they could open fire. The sight was strange, even by the standards of John Freeman and Garfield. Ahead of them were 3 hostages sitting bound to their chairs. 2 of them were teenage girls. Both were short. But one was a little plumper and had wide eyes and black hair. The other was skinny and had blonde hair. They both looked scared out of their minds and confused. The 3rd hostage was a middle-aged man with a gut who sweated profusely. Pacing around the room was a small, pale-faced, doe-eyed boy with long hair, a skinny build, and muscular arms. "This is wrong and you know it is, Arthur," he said to nobody. "People are getting hurt. Abby is scared." He looked like he was trying to de-escalate the problem, but his expression darkened as soon as he said that. He turned to show the left side of his face, painted like a skull. "Like you care about what happens," said the one named Arthur. "You're no saint yourself, James." "What is going on here?" asked Ebony. "This is the problem," said Lehman. "Gregory Seseska. But he has 2 other personalities, James Patrick and Arthur Gale. James, he says, represents the light. Arthur represents the dark. But if you listen to them individually, it's difficult to say who's darker than whom." "And who is dat?" She pointed to the desk where crouched was a more petite boy. He looked like a more appealing and better-dressed version of Gollum. "Don't say that about James," the boys said to the one named James. "It's okay, Davis," said James. "I can handle this." "Shut up, Davis," said Arthur. "The smart ones are talking." "Don't pick on Davis," said James. "What are you going to do about it, you white-knighting tryhard?" "I'll call the cops on you. That's what I'll do." "And what'll they say? Look at us. We share the same body. God, this is just one more reason why I hate you." "Enough fighting with yourself," said Garfield. "Stay out of this, you orange freak of goddamn nature," screamed Arthur. Arthur raised his Desert Eagle at Arthur, but James held out his arms. "Don't shoot!" yelled James. Garfield pulled the trigger and put a bullet into the teenage boy's head. Greg fell back and landed on the ground, lifeless. The girls stared down in shock. Lehman, John Freeman, and Ebony leaned in to look at the body. "No!" screamed Davis. He pounced onto the body, weeping. Lehman walked to him to try and comfort him. "Stay away!" said Davis. "Leave us alone!" He hugged Greg's body, his shoulders shaking, but he bolted up and produced a knife made of flint. The trio held up their weapons in defense, but Davis didn't go after them. Instead, he flipped the blade downward and plunged it into his chest. He worked the knife around and finally discarded it. The girl screamed as Davis thrust his hand into the wound. He gasped and choked. Even John Freeman and Principal Lehman were horrified. Ebony and Garfield watched, intrigued. Davis yanked his hand out with one strong tug, holding his bloody, pulsating heart. Everyone gasped. Davis brought the organ to Greg's lips and slowly died. The heart detached from the arteries and veins, trailing from Davis's chest wound, and fought its way down Greg's throat, creating a bullfrog appearance in the neck, until finally descending to wherever in the body it wanted to go. Greg's body shook and convulsed like a current of electricity was introduced into the corpse. The trio, Lehman, the teacher, and the girls, watched in shock and terror. The body stopped. The living people leaned in for a closer inspection. The hair turned light and retracted into the scalp, creating a bowl cut. The eyes opened, and the body bolted back up. "Oh, hey, guys," he said in a high-pitched voice like someone increased the speed of his speech. "I am Chibi Durf!" He screeched the name Chibi Durf. The trio, teachers, and the girls were repulsed. Chibi walked to Davis's body. "Oh, look," he said, "a dead body. What wonderful things can I do with this?" He looked at the hostages. Whatever went through his head at that point wouldn't be good. He picked up Davis's corpse and moved its legs with a walking motion toward the teacher. Once at the destination, he moved his right hand to land on the teacher's shoulder. "Hey, Mr. Hanson," said Chibi, "would you like to play with me, poopy poo poop?" Chibi grabbed both of Davis's hands and positioned them on each side of Mr. Hanson's head. He brought the hands together like a monkey who played cymbals and crushed Mr. Hanson's head. Blood geysered straight up onto the ceiling tile and rained downward, splattering the girls. They were appropriately disgusted. Hanson's corpse leaned forward, but the ropes kept it from falling out of the chair. "That explains the blood," said Ebony. "Put down the body, Chibi," said Garfield, "or taste more lead with gunfires." "I don't wanna," screamed Chibi. "I wanna play more." A glow surrounded Chibi, and Davis's corpse melded with his body. He grew a good 10 feet and looked like he and Davis went through Seth Brundle's telepod together in The Fly. It was a gruesome sight. "I wanna play!" bellowed Chibi Davis. "Garfield," said John Freeman. "John Freeman thinks it's time to open fire." "I agree," said Garfield. They brought out machine guns from a suitcase John Freeman carried with him and commenced a firefight on Chibi Davis. Although bullets riddled the body, nothing seemed to bring the monster down. Ebony raised her wand but caught a glimpse of a patch in Chibi Davis's chest. She remembered when she was a small child and a teacher read her the book The Hobbit. Ebony hated that book, but at that moment she remembered how the dragon Smaug was defeated. A small patch in the armor where a scale should be instead of exposed flesh. That was how Bard killed Smaug. That must be this thing's weak spot, she thought, returning to the current situation. Why these two morons weren't seeing it was beyond her comprehension. Ebony shot a black orb into the hole, and Chibi Davis froze. "Sup shotting!" screamed Ebony. The gunslingers ceased firing. How they understood her command, they didn't know. But they looked ahead and saw Chibi Davis convulsing and breaking down. "I'm a banana!" screamed Chibi Davis. He exploded, painting the entire classroom red. The texture of the blood looked similar to mashed bananas. The trio walked to the girls and untied them. "Are you two girls okay?" asked John Freeman. "Yes," said the plump one. "We are." I think. Please state the names, said John Freeman. I'm Abigail, said the plump one. And I'm Ashley, said the other. And I am Garfield, he introduced himself. Brother, groaned Ebony. And it's a good thing we saved you, said Garfield, before I called in reinforcements. What reinforcements? Asked Ebony sarcastically. One press of this, Garfield pointed to his belt buckle, and reinforcements save us with savings. The belt buckle looked like a slice of lasagna. Ah, good thing I found a weak spot, huh? A very good thing, said John Freeman. Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way did good once again. Only problem is, Ebony took another long dramatic pause. I'm soaked in blood! Don't worry, said John Freeman. Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way can change out of that on the ship. A boy popped from behind the desk. The trio got their weapons ready. Don't shoot, said Lehman. He's a student. They lowered their weapons. The boy looked around the room, but didn't appear fazed. Wow, he finally said. This is truly the hero's work. I am that hero, said Garfield. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some lovings to make. He winked at the two girls, who giggled flirtatiously. Garfield led Abigail and Ashley out of the room. That's exactly what I desire from my novella, said the boy. What's his name? Garfield, said John Freeman. That name won't stay in place, said the boy. I'll call him Gregner. Who are you? Asked Ebony. My handle is Jim Theus, said the boy. Some individuals refer to me as Captain Thesaurus, and I'm currently inscribing a novella called The Eye of Argon. Sounds stupid, said Ebony, and she exited the room. Forgive Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way, said John Freeman, and allowed John Freeman to stay for a while and aid in paperwork and cleanup. That is much appreciated, said Lehman. Quite a bit to clean up. The ship is low on fuel, said John Freeman. How can this be? Asked Garfield. The detour to Hot Topic used up some of the fuel, explained John Freeman, as did the Seattle mission. John Freeman, Garfield, and Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way will have to make a quick stop to refuel. So are you saying this was my fault, Prep? Asked Ebony. It was bad enough that she had to deal with the two of the weirdest men she'd ever met, but now they had to stop again before reaching Draco. That just wasn't fair. She just changed out of the bloody clothes to see Draco in a more presentable way. A black leather dress, a pentagram necklace, combat boots, black fishnets, 4 pairs of earrings, and her hair was fashioned in a semi-messy bun. No, said John Freeman. John Freeman isn't blaming Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way. Could you fucking stop talking like dat? Said Ebony. Like what? Lick dat. Like what? Saying our nams all the time. It's irritating. I know who the fuck I am, and I know who the fuck you are. Garfield stepped forward, saying, Don't be screaming at my friend, bitch tits, or I will be smacking you into outer hemispheres with force. You don't want that, do you? Ebony quieted down and stared at Garfield. For once, since they met, she agreed that he was right. She didn't want him to hit her. At the same time, however, she couldn't deny that she needed these two men to get her to Draco. Okay, resigned Ebony. We'll stop for gas. Get us there in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail, said Garfield to John Freeman. They shared a handshake that only the men knew. Garfield had found John Freeman half dead in a demolished building overrun by zombies. Of course, zombies didn't frighten Garfield, but that didn't mean he was naive to the danger of the living dead. When the horde of flesh-eaters nearly overtook him, John Freeman rescued him before he could call for backup. Garfield was impressed by his performance on the battlefield and asked if he would be interested in aiding him in more quests. John Freeman was hesitant. He had just lost his brother Gordon Freeman and longed to return to his wife and Henry Freeman, his son. John Freeman asked his strange rescuer if he could give him a ride home. At first, Garfield didn't want to because home life was for ladies and children instead of men. But he understood John Freeman's mind. The family was essential to many people. He saw this in the alien races he saved across the universe. But when they arrived at his house, John Freeman was devastated to find that his family had gone missing. They left a note stating that they had gone to seek shelter from a race of alien beings called Combines, and were sorry they couldn't see him again. John Freeman told Garfield that he needed to find them again, and fast. Garfield agreed, but warned him of the lifestyle he possessed and whether he was brave enough to handle it. So began their partnership. John Freeman landed on the ship in an airfield and conversed with the owner about payment. Garfield stood next to him, haggling prices. The owner didn't want to go through this, but he had a difficult time dealing with fluctuating gas prices. Now he had a sizable anthropomorphic cat and an odd-speaking American haggling prices with him like Arab traders. And he was Arabic! Ebony grew bored listening to the two idiots and headed to explore more. The entire square looked like something out of a preppy movie like Star Wars. Flat-screen TVs, devices that looked like computer screens but were advertised as phones. They were said not only to make calls and text messages, but could store music and movies and give a person access to the internet. What a revolutionary concept. The music itself seemed to have changed into that which was harder to find genuinely gothic bands. Most were Billie Eilish, Ed Sheeran, Kanye West, Lizzo, Imagine Dragons, and BTS, all of which looked preppy to her. She hated preps, and all around her was nothing but preps. At least in Hogwarts, she was around like-minded people, like the Slytherin students. They weren't preppy in the slightest, and since most of the student body was Slytherin, she felt right at home. At least, that was how she remembered her time at Hogwarts. When Ebony walked past the window of an electronics store, she saw something she had never expected to come across since her release from hell. She ran into the store and stopped just a few feet away from a man and a woman. The man had shorter hair than he did in his adolescent years, and although it had traces of gray, it was still as dark as a blackboard. His eyes were still as green as a fresh pickled toad, and his glasses, perfectly round lenses, rested on his nose. A lightning bolt-shaped scar rested above his right eyebrow. Anyone with common sense knew this to be the famous boy who lived, Harry Potter. Another familiar face was the woman at his side, red hair and freckles. "Ginny," said Harry to the woman, "I don't think our wages will cover an iPad for Albus." "I know, Harry," said the woman named Ginny, "but he needs it to help him through the semester." "I wish they had student discounts for our children," said Harry. "I've written every letter I can to the Ministry of Magic about it, and so have Ron and Hermione. Still nothing. It makes no sense to me. They want to update the teaching tools for their students, but they won't offer anything to help cut the cost. At this rate, it's like we won't be able to make ends meet." "We will, Harry. Don't worry. This isn't the worst we faced. I'll take the Death Eaters and Burning Scar over this." "You don't mean that. Try me." "I know it's frustrating, but this is what happens when Umbridge's nephew heads the Ministry of Magic. Bridges are burned, Muggleborns become scapegoats, and all we get from his leadership are ego-stroking rallies and an endless wave of tweets claiming it all as fake news." "Vampire?" asked Ebony. Harry and Ginny turned to look at Ebony. This was the first time they'd heard that word used in years. "Hello?" started Harry. "Can I help you?" "Vampire," repeated Ebony. "Don't you remember me?" "No, I don't," said Harry, confused. "You may be confusing me with someone else." "No, I remember you, Vampire Potter. You went to Hogwarts with me. You did too, Darkness. But you weren't married. BTW, how could you marry her? She's so basic. You were fucking Draco." "What the hell are you talking about?" asked Ginny. "What the hell are you talking about?" echoed Harry. "We were in Slytherin together," explained Ebony. "You, me, Draco, Diabolo, and Bloody Mary Smith, Darkness, Hagrid, and Dracula. We went to concerts at Hogsmeade and slashed our wrists depressingly." Harry and Ginny stared at each other. They were confused, as if someone told them that Brexit was a practical joke played by Tony Blair and Margaret Thatcher's ghost. Harry stared closer at Ebony, and the proverbial bell went off in his head. He knew. "Ebony, Darkness, Dementia, Raven Way," said Harry. "You know her?" asked Ginny. She'd known Harry since her first year of Hogwarts. She only knew about two women in his life. Hermione Weasley, their sister-in-law, and Cho Chang, a Ravenclaw witch who was a year older than Harry, but no one, not even Harry, talked about her, especially since she ratted them out to Umbridge to build Dumbledore's army. This, however, bordered on both scary and dubious. "Yes," said Harry, "I know her, but I was never around her. Yes, you were, said Ebony. We were in a band together. I was one of the witches in Dumbledum's army. You were also the one who tried to grab me, said Harry. Do you remember that? That caused Ebony to be silent for the first time. But, she started again, you wanted me. You and Draco both. You fought over me. We even had sex with each other. We never did that, said Harry. Of all the things he said to have done, having an intimate relationship with Draco Malfoy was his least favorite of the rumors. He never understood what it was about him and Draco that led younger witches, wizards, muggles, and squibs, principally witches and female muggles and squibs, to fantasize about them as a couple. They hardly had anything in common, which was primarily true regarding the validity of witches and wizards. Draco was a pureblood, and he believed he and other purebloods to be superior to witches and wizards who were either half-blood or muggle-born, like Harry's sister-in-law, Hermione Weasley. This was not a philosophy Harry aligned with at all, and he certainly never saw himself becoming friends with someone who did uphold that viewpoint. I never had that kind of relationship with Draco, said Harry, and I know he never had that kind of relationship with you. You're lying, yelled Ebony. We were all in the same house together. No, we weren't, said Harry. Ginny, Hermione, Ron, Neville, and myself were in Gryffindor. Draco was in Slytherin. You, however, were not in Slytherin. Lies, you poser! Screamed Ebony. Now the entire store turned their attention to the three. Ginny grew embarrassed. Harry, said Ginny, let's just go. We can shop some other time. Yes, said Harry. I don't know how you came back, Ebony, but I know you won't stop looking for Draco. Do yourself a service. Stop right now. There's no reason for you to disturb him or his son. Grow up. You should be an adult by now anyway. Harry and Ginny Potter left the store. Ebony stood still, at a loss for words. How could they say this to her? How could anyone? How could they not remember? But maybe they were right. Perhaps it was time to move on. She ran out of the shop. Garfield, carrying a plastic bag full of clothing and a shoebox, and John Freeman walked around. They couldn't find Ebony anywhere. A figure ran past them at great speed. They recognized it as Ebony and followed her, matching her pace. They all reached the ship. Ebony ran up the walkway and into her cabin. She found a straight razor she pilfered from John Freeman's medicine cabinet. She slashed her wrists and lay down in bed. Like the Facebook page, Instagram page, Tumblr, and TikTok pages. Subscribe today. I upload every Saturday, or at least try to. Hit the notification bell to get notified. Like and favorite the video if you enjoyed it. Share it with everybody that you can. Thank you very much for watching. Please stay safe and healthy. And remember, it's chaos. Be kind.